The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
At that time, Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
All of us, my dear friends, wherever we go, whatever we do, people see us and they say, "Here, they are Christians." So when we say that we are Christians or believers or even Catholics, what is it that has to be unique about ourselves? The uniqueness of the disciples of Christ was explained today in the Gospel according to Matthew. And Jesus says, as we just heard, "You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world." When you go to the Greek text of the Old Testament or the New Testament, we find that there is a word in Greek language, hilei, which is used to call someone a you. You means that you are someone that you can never be found anywhere else. That's the meaning of the word you that is used when Jesus says, "You are the light of the world and the salt of the earth." The reason why Jesus says that is because the word salt was used so often in the Old Testament as something that is very important, because they say salt was called one of the most essential items of life. In the Roman Empire, they say there was a saying, there is nothing more important than the sun and the salt. The sun, of course, obvious, it gives light. If there is no light, life is impossible. And in those days, salt was also so essential. They said salt is so essential. Without salt, we cannot live, because until the time the refrigerators were produced, people used salt in order to preserve food, meat and fish and vegetables or whatever. Salt was the only item, the material or the element that was used to keep life going. So that is why the word salt was used in so many ways. The Greek word for salt is sale, and the Latin word is salarium, from which comes the English word salary. Because without salary, without salt, without sale, life is impossible. That was the way the word salt was used then. Now, when we say these words, salt of the earth and the light of the world, Jesus is reminding his own disciples, if you don't have it, you are no good. If you are a follower of mine, if you are a Christian, if you say that you are a believer, be this. If it is not there, if you are not the salt of the earth, if you are not the light of the world, you are useless, in other words. That's why you can see that when Jesus explains, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, what use it has? And it says, except to be thrown out and trample under people's feet. So he makes this comparison. If you are a follower of mine, if you are a disciple of mine, be a salt, be the light. And if you don't have it, you're not of any good. So be the salt of the earth, be the light of the world. Now, when you reflect again, my dear friends, what is salt? Salt is used only so much in order to give taste. If you have too little of salt, the food is not palatable or not edible. If you have too much salt, again, you can't eat the same food. It has to be used a certain amount, which is to be determined, which is to be decisive in making food become tasty. So therefore, my dear friends, Jesus is telling his own disciples, be the salt of the earth and the light of the world, which means know your role in this world. Recognize your duties for the well-being of mankind. Come to understand what your role is in the world out there. The first reading today, taken from the book of prophet Isaiah, which goes back to about 700-800 years before the time of Christ. The author recognizes the realities of life in his own world. There was so much of poverty around. There were the domination of the rich, the oppression of the poor, people having to face all kinds of injustices in the society at that time. So therefore, Isaiah the prophet calls out the people of Israel and he says, is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own flesh. Then shall your light break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up speedily. So Isaiah recognizes that what is important in the world out there, when you are a believer and a disciple of God in the Israelite identity, the uniqueness is that you become someone who is concerned about the other. If you do not live your life for the others, you are not of any use. That's what the first reading tells us. The meaning of what Isaiah wanted to convey was also what Jesus meant when he used the word salt. Because salt does not give taste to itself. Salt is focused only on giving value, taste to the food. And also the light, because when you have a light, we don't look at the light. Because there is light, it falls on the objects of the world, and then we can see it. Salt is used in the food, and we don't look at the salt that is inside the food, we eat it. So therefore, the uniqueness of a believer, the uniqueness of a disciple of Christ is that you are concerned about the others in the world. If you do not have it, if you are not concerned about the well-being of mankind, the injustices that are around you, you are not being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. It's very interesting, my dear friends, when you read the history of the only Christian continent in the world, the European continent. Christianity has lost its meaning over a period of 2 centuries. There are authors who write about it. And especially one of the leading men who had studied the history of Europe, he writes saying that Europe was the only Christian community or the Christian culture in the entire world. But Christianity lost its splendor and its attraction in the 20th century. Why? The First World War happened in Europe. Millions of people were murdered. The Second World War happened in Europe. Millions were murdered. Altogether, 60 million men and women in the world were killed, maimed, and destroyed in the face of a majority Christian communities in many countries in Europe. So what did the Christians do? They all looked away. There was Bolsheviks in Russia, the Nazis in Germany, and they saw the evil intentions of all these men and women who are hungry for power, using racism, using religion, using all kinds of destructive elements to come into power. The Christian world was silent. Bishop Robert Barron, a great writer in the United States, he said, the Christian world did not become the salt of the earth when the two world wars were happening. They didn't become the light of the world when this happened. Why? It was all about themselves. Let us protect our churches. We are not going to criticize Hitler. Let us protect our schools. We are not going to find fault with the Nazis. Let us protect the Christians that are out there in Germany. Let us not voice out our concerns about the mayhem that Nazis were carrying out. So Bishop Robert Barron says, what did the Christians do? They looked away. They acted as if it was not happening. And some Christians even went along with it. So over a period of time in the 20th century and the early part of this century, he says, we have lost our taste. We have lost our splendor. So over generations of people, Christianity become an unattractive people who are only thinking about themselves. So this is exactly, my dear friends, what happens if you and I, living in this world, facing the realities of life, if you do not become the salt of the earth, we are of no good. And people out there will see us as nothing different. There is nothing unique about ourselves. The second reading taken from the letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Paul also was a man who had undergone the conversion of his own life. He was someone who was a Jew out there believing in the racism of Judaic religion. And it took him a tremendous amount of a conversion experience and a time spent in reflection in Arabia for about 3 years, which made him realize, here I am. It's not about my own religion. It's not about my own race. It's about people who are out there, no matter what their race is, no matter what their color is. As long as I commit myself to give dignity and find God's sacredness within themselves, I am not a follower of Christ. That's why Paul was a man who was so effective. He was one of the few people who became powerful messengers of Christ. Paul became the salt of the earth and the light of the world because he was just an individual, but with full of color, full of energy, full of light within himself. In your life and in my life, my dear friends, as I said, the uniqueness that is to be found within us is being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Again, when you reflect on how does salt bring taste and light becomes the light of the world, it is also, my dear friends, it's not being the center stage of the world. When salt is used, as I said, you only use a small amount, but its power, but its quality is found in the larger reality of having tasty food. So when you are a believer, when you are a Christian, if you are the salt of the earth, you don't take the center stage. You only do your part and you allow the world to grow. You only make your contribution, you stay away. And that is why the explanation of being a Christian, they say, you move away from the ego drama of the world and you choose to be in the theodrama of the world. Because in the world out, we will always find people who want to take the center stage. They are talented, they are capable, they are efficient, but it's all about themselves. Ego drama. But a man or a woman who takes on the theodrama is someone who does not want to take the center stage. You do what you are called to do, and you make your contribution. You bring tastes to the world outside. You bring light to the environment that you belong to, and you stay away. That's being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. My dear friends, last few months, I've been, as you all know, been part of the campaign for finding truth for the Easter Sunday tragedy in 2019. So we have had so many activities that we have done as men and women of Catholic faith. It has happened so often that number of Buddhist monks whom I have come to know, even just last night, someone who knew me for the last few months, a Buddhist monk, calls me and he says, referring to the demonstration that was there yesterday in the morning on Independence Day, he said, Father, you Catholics and Christians, you have to be proud of yourself. I said, what do you mean? What he said is that we all believe in democracy. We know that when an injustice happens, we all have to express our views and show our solidarity with people. He said, we Buddhist monks, we do not know how to express our displeasure. You Catholics have shown us how to express your dissent, how to show that you do not agree. You show us how to demonstrate against the powers that be. And he said, you all are a minority, but you are teaching us lessons to the majority of this country. In fact, my dear friends, I was humbled by what this monk was telling me. We are people who are a minority. We are people, sometimes individuals, working in an office, living in a neighborhood where the majority are non-believers, not Christians. If you and I are to be the salt of the earth, my dear friends, the quantity doesn't matter so much, but it is the quality of our life which will make us become, as Jesus says, the salt of the earth and the light of the world.